When you stop trying to contact him, it's like you're sending a message without ever saying a word. The silence, that void of communication, starts to speak louder than anything you could say. It's a powerful thing, silence. Because sometimes when we're in the middle of something, whether it's a relationship, a friendship, or even a professional connection, we forget how much noise we're making. The constant reaching out, the checking in, the effort to maintain that connection. We get caught up in thinking that we need to be heard, that we need to fill the space with words, with actions, with something, anything to show we care, that we're present. But what happens when that stops? What happens when the effort is no longer there? That's when things start to shift. It's in the quiet that you realize the truth begins to surface. The absence of your voice, your calls, your messages, it forces him and it forces you to confront what's really there. There's nowhere to hide anymore. There's no buffer between the feelings, the thoughts, the emotions. Everything gets stripped down to its core. And in that space, that silence, something powerful happens. People begin to reflect. I've seen it time and time again. It's only when we stop reaching out, when we stop trying to force something to happen, that people really start to understand the depth of what was there or wasn't there. At first, it can be uncomfortable. For him, for you, there's that awkwardness. You might start questioning, was I too quick to pull back? Should I have stayed in the game a little longer? But here's the thing. What we often overlook is how necessary that discomfort is. You see, discomfort isn't just something to avoid. Discomfort is the breeding ground for growth. It's the space where we can take a step back and say, what's really going on here? What's important to me? What do I need to learn from this? When you stop trying to contact him, the silence forces him to face his own reality. It's no longer about the daily check-ins or the reassurance. He's left with his own thoughts, his own feelings. The questions start to form in his mind. Why isn't she reaching out? What does that mean about me? Did I take her for granted? And here's where the magic happens. It's in that self-reflection, in that questioning, that he begins to uncover his own truths. Maybe he's been taking you for granted. Maybe he's been too focused on other things, too distracted to recognize what really matters. But when you stop reaching out, you're giving him the chance to come to those conclusions on his own. You're forcing him to take a good, hard look at himself. And it's not just about him, it's about you too. Because in that space of silence, you get the chance to reflect as well. You get to take a step back and ask yourself, what does this relationship mean to me? What do I really need from it? And am I getting it? You realize that it's not just about him, it's about you too. You have the opportunity to reconnect with yourself, to honor your own needs, your own boundaries, your own sense of worth. Let's be real for a second. It's easy to get lost in someone else, to become consumed by the desire to fix, to heal, to reach out, to make things work. But sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing at all. Sometimes the greatest act of love you can offer is the space for someone else to figure it out. And in giving that space, you give yourself the freedom to step into a new chapter as well. What happens next is where things get really interesting. He's left alone with his thoughts, but so are you. And now both of you are standing in this space of reflection. He may start to realize that without your effort, the relationship begins to feel less certain. It starts to feel fragile. He might not have realized how much of a foundation your efforts were holding up. And that realization, though uncomfortable, is the first step toward change. Because now he's asking himself, what do I want? What's truly important to me? And that's where growth begins, real growth. Not the surface level stuff we sometimes settle for, but real, deep, introspective growth that makes us better people, better partners, better friends. And it doesn't stop there. You've made your move, you step back, and now you get to witness his response or lack thereof. But you're not just waiting for him to act. You're waiting for yourself to learn, to grow, to see if he's willing to rise to the occasion, if he's willing to step up and meet you where you are. And in doing so, you also learn what you truly need in a relationship. Not just the words, but the actions. Not just the talk, but the walk. The silence, in the end, speaks more truthfully than anything else ever could. So the next time you find yourself in a situation where you feel the need to pull back, know that silence isn't an absence, it's a presence. It's a space for both of you to reflect, to grow, to question, and to ultimately change. And sometimes the greatest clarity comes not from saying something, but from hearing what the silence has to say. Because the truth is, growth doesn't happen in the comfort zone. It happens in the moments of discomfort, in the silence, in the space you create when you stop trying to make something happen and instead let the world show you what's really meant to be. When you stop trying to contact him, it's like throwing a rock into the calm surface of a pond. At first, there's a ripple, a disturbance. He might feel uneasy, even a little unsettled. But the truth is, discomfort is where growth begins. See, we don't grow when we're comfortable. We grow when things shake us up, when we're pushed out of our familiar patterns. And when you stop reaching out, when you stop showing up, you're doing more than just stepping back. You're giving him the space to face himself. For him, this discomfort might feel foreign. After all, when was the last time he had to really ask himself, what do I want? What am I willing to fight for? Often, people don't realize how much of their emotional well-being is tied to the comfort of having someone always there, ready to check in, ready to reassure. But when that constant presence is gone, something shifts. It forces him to step out of his autopilot mode and look at the relationship with fresh eyes. The reality hits him. You've been a steady part of his life, and now that's no longer guaranteed. And this is where the growth starts. This is where he has to take a hard look at himself and his choices. Maybe he's been too passive. Maybe he's been expecting you to do all the heavy lifting while he just coasted along. Maybe he didn't appreciate what you brought to the table. And guess what? He's got to deal with that. In that space, that discomfort, he's going to have to ask himself, do I care enough to fix this? Am I willing to take the initiative? And that's when the real work begins. Not just for him, but for you too. When you create that space by stepping back, you're also giving yourself a chance to grow. You might be surprised by how much you learn about yourself in the process. The moment you stop chasing, you stop trying to make something happen that maybe wasn't meant to happen. You open up room for your own growth. You stop being wrapped up in someone else's actions or inactions, and you begin to focus on what you need. Maybe you start to see your own patterns more clearly, the ways you've allowed yourself to give so much, to pour your energy into someone else's happiness while neglecting your own. You begin to realize that maybe it's time for you to show up for yourself in the way you've been showing up for others. And that's a beautiful thing. When you stop reaching out, it's like hitting a reset button. You're no longer chasing something that may not be aligned with your true needs. You start focusing on your own emotional health. And in doing so, you create a space for both of you to take responsibility for your actions, for your feelings. You stop depending on external validation and start looking inward. You begin to see how much power you have in determining your own happiness, your own peace. But here's the kicker. This process isn't just about him or about you. It's about the relationship itself. Relationships, whether romantic or otherwise, grow and thrive on mutual effort. When you stop chasing, you force him to decide if he's willing to meet you halfway. You give him the opportunity to rise up, to take that step forward on his own. And if he's truly invested, he'll recognize the importance of your absence. He'll recognize that if he wants this, he has to show up too. In the end, the discomfort is a gift. It's an opportunity for both of you to reflect, to grow, and to decide if this connection is something worth fighting for. Growth happens when we're forced to step outside of our comfort zones. It happens when we're left to figure things out on our own. And as uncomfortable as it might be, it's only through this process of self-examination that true change can happen. So next time you feel like you're putting in all the effort and getting nothing in return, remember, stepping back doesn't mean giving up. It means giving space for real growth, not just for him, but for you. And if something is meant to come together, it will. But if not, you've created the room for something even better to enter your life. And that's the real beauty of personal growth. It's not about waiting for someone to change. It's about realizing that you have the power to change everything, starting with yourself. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do in a relationship is let go. And I don't mean letting go in the sense of giving up or walking away without a second thought. I mean truly letting go, giving the space for transformation. You see, when you stop trying to contact him, something remarkable happens. It's like opening the door to the unknown. A door that once open offers both of you a chance for growth, for reinvention. You're not abandoning him. You're giving both of you the freedom to evolve. Now, I know this can feel difficult. It's not easy to step away from something or someone you care about, especially when it feels like it's slipping through your fingers. The temptation is strong to keep holding on, to keep trying, to keep fighting for something you believe in. But here's the thing. Sometimes holding on too tightly is what keeps you from finding your true path. And it's what keeps the other person from finding theirs. Letting go doesn't mean you're giving up. It means you're trusting the process. You're trusting that both of you are worthy of something better, even if that means going through some tough moments in the interim. You see, when you let go, you allow room for both of you to transform. It's easy to get comfortable in a situation, in a relationship, even when it's not serving you. You start to believe that this is all there is, that this is how it's supposed to be. But when you step back, when you stop chasing, you give space for both of you to reimagine what the relationship could be. Maybe he starts to realize what he truly values, what he's been taking for granted. And maybe, just maybe, you start to see things from a new perspective too. Think about it like this. We're all constantly evolving. We're changing, we're growing, and we're learning more about who we are every day. Relationships are no different. They need room to breathe, room to grow. If you're always the one reaching out, always the one trying to fix things, always the one initiating, there's no space for both of you to grow independently. You're too wrapped up in each other, too tangled up in the daily routine of trying to make it work. But by stepping back, you let go of that weight. You allow both of you to find your own space, to reassert your own identities, and to figure out what truly matters to you. For him, this could be a wake-up call. He might not have realized how much of the relationship was built on your effort. It's in that moment of absence that he's forced to reflect. Was I really showing up the way I should have? Do I appreciate this person the way I thought I did? And for you, well, the same thing happens. You start to reevaluate your own needs, your own desires, and you begin to understand just how much you've been giving of yourself. You start to see the areas in your life where you've been sacrificing your own happiness, your own peace, in the name of keeping someone else's happiness. Letting go allows you both to find your own strength, your own independence. And when that happens, you stop being bound by the weight of expectation. Instead, you each have the freedom to come into your own as individuals. If the relationship is meant to be, it will find its way back, but only after both of you have had the chance to breathe, to grow, to reestablish yourselves as whole, strong people. When that happens, the relationship that emerges will be built on a much stronger foundation. One that's not based on need or fear, but on mutual respect, growth, and understanding. But this isn't just about the relationship. It's about you too. The more you try to hold on to something or someone, the more you lose yourself. You start to forget who you are outside of that person, outside of that connection. When you let go, you give yourself the opportunity to rediscover who you are, to reconnect with your own passions, your own dreams, and your own sense of self-worth. You give yourself permission to be whole without needing someone else to complete you. And that's the most powerful thing you can do for yourself. So letting go isn't just about taking a step back. It's about making room for something greater. It's about having the courage to trust that the right things and the right people will find their way into your life when you stop holding on so tightly. It's about knowing that growth can't happen if you're always clinging to the past, always holding on to what's familiar, even if it's not right. In the end, letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means making room for transformation, for new possibilities, and for the kind of growth that can only happen when you're no longer afraid to release what's no longer serving you. And in that freedom, both of you can step into something better. Let go and watch what comes next. When you stop trying to contact him, something shifts. The dynamics of the relationship change. And suddenly, you're no longer the one doing all the reaching out, doing all the work to maintain the connection. You've created space, and in that space, something powerful happens. Both of you are forced to face what's really going on. And for him, this shift is going to make him question everything. See, when you stop trying, you're not just stepping back. You're creating an opportunity for him to step up. Here's the thing. Relationships, whether romantic or otherwise, are a two-way street. They require effort from both sides. And if one person is always the one pushing, always the one initiating, always the one reaching out, it creates an imbalance. One person is carrying the load while the other is simply along for the ride. That's not how any healthy relationship works, and it's not sustainable. So when you stop trying to contact him, you're not giving up. You're not quitting. You're making a powerful statement. You're telling him, if this is going to work, you need to meet me where I am. You need to make the effort too. At first, this might be unsettling for him. He may feel the tension, the absence, and for a moment, he may even wonder why you've pulled back. It might confuse him. But here's the beauty of it. That confusion forces him to face his own complacency. It's no longer about you doing all the work, doing all the emotional labor. Now, he has to decide if he values this relationship enough to step up, to put in the effort, and to meet you where you're at. For the first time, he's going to have to actively participate in building this connection, not just passively receiving it. And that right there is where the transformation begins. It's easy to take someone for granted when they're always there, when they're always reaching out, when they're always the one trying to make things happen. But when that's no longer the case, it forces a shift in perspective. It makes him ask himself, am I invested in this? Do I want this to work? And if he's being honest with himself, he'll have to admit that he needs to take responsibility for his part in the relationship. He can't just coast along any longer. But here's the thing. This isn't just about him. It's about you too. By stepping back, by creating that space, you're showing yourself that you deserve to be treated with the same level of care, effort, and attention that you've been giving. You're telling yourself that you're worthy of a partner who matches your energy, who doesn't just sit back and let you carry the load. You're showing yourself that your time, your energy, your emotions are valuable, and that you don't need to waste them on someone who isn't willing to meet you halfway. And as you do this, something powerful happens inside you. You start to see your own worth more clearly. You start to understand that relationships are about reciprocity. They're about mutual effort. You start to realize that you don't need to beg for someone's attention. You don't need to constantly chase after someone who isn't ready to chase you. You are worthy of someone who respects you, someone who recognizes your value and is willing to put in the effort to make things work. This shift in perspective is the real gift. When you stop trying to contact him, it forces both of you to take a step back and reflect on what this relationship truly means. It's an opportunity to recalibrate, to redefine the terms, to ensure that both of you are on the same page. And if he's truly invested, he'll rise to the occasion. He'll recognize the space you've created as an invitation for him to step up, to show that he values what you bring to the table. He won't just wait for you to reach out again. He'll take that initiative himself because he now understands that a relationship is a partnership, not a one-sided effort. But let's be real about this. If he doesn't step up, if he doesn't take that initiative, then that's your answer, and that's okay. It might sting a little at first, but it's a necessary realization. You've given him the opportunity to rise, and if he chooses not to, then you know it's time to let go. You've learned what you need to learn, and you've given yourself the chance to grow in the process. The beauty of this is that regardless of his response, you're not waiting around anymore. You're not putting your life on pause. You've taken control of your own journey, and that's a powerful thing. So Don't be afraid to step back when you need to. Don't be afraid to stop reaching out, because in doing so, you're giving both of you the chance to evolve, to grow, and to build something that's truly equal. And when you do, you'll find that the relationships that are meant to stay will always find their way back to you stronger, more intentional, and more fulfilling than before. The question isn't whether he will step up. The question is whether you're willing to step back and let him prove it. When you stop trying to contact him, you create a pause, a moment of reflection, not just for him, but for you too. This pause, this space, forces both of you to reevaluate everything. It's easy to get lost in the daily grind, in the constant effort to keep things moving, to keep the connection alive. But what happens when you stop pushing? What happens when you let the silence take over for a while? In that silence, something powerful happens. It forces both of you to face the truths that might have been overlooked in the rush of life, in the constant back and forth of texting, calling, reaching out. When you stop trying to contact him, you stop filling the space with distractions. You stop doing all the emotional labor, the work of keeping things in motion, and that's when the truth comes out. For him, the sudden absence of your effort will be a wake-up call. He's going to start asking himself questions he might not have asked before. Where did she go? Why isn't she reaching out anymore? And then the harder questions will follow. Am I doing enough? Have I been taking her for granted? Those questions are uncomfortable, but they're necessary. They force him to confront the reality that relationships are built on effort. And it takes more than one person to make it work. You might not see it immediately, but in that moment of absence, he's being forced to step back and reflect on what he's been contributing or not contributing to the relationship. Now, here's the beauty of it. As he reflects, you're doing the same. You're no longer caught up in the need to make things work and the constant energy of reaching out, checking in, trying to keep everything intact. You're giving yourself the space to reconnect with yourself, to figure out what you truly need, what you truly want. Sometimes when we're in the thick of things, we forget to ask ourselves the most important question: what am I getting out of this? It's easy to get lost in trying to meet someone else's needs, to put their feelings ahead of your own, especially when you care deeply about them. But when you stop reaching out, you give yourself the space to realize just how much you've been giving. You start to recognize your own needs, your own desires. And more importantly, you recognize that you are worthy of having those needs met. That's when real growth happens. When you stop reaching out, you begin to see the patterns that you might have overlooked before. Maybe you've been carrying more of the weight in the relationship than you realized. Maybe you've been the one doing all the emotional heavy lifting while he's been coasting along, waiting for you to keep everything moving. And you start to ask yourself, is this fair? Am I giving too much of myself without getting enough in return? That's not a bad thing to ask yourself. In fact, it's a crucial part of personal growth. Relationships shouldn't be about sacrifice at the cost of your own well-being. They should be about mutual respect, mutual effort. And when you stop trying to contact him, you allow yourself the chance to find that balance, to set boundaries, to recognize that you deserve a relationship where both people are invested equally. It's important to understand that when you step back, you're not just testing him, you're also testing yourself. You're testing your own worth, your own boundaries, and your own sense of self. You're allowing yourself the space to heal if you need to grow, and to understand what you truly need from a partner. You're teaching yourself that your emotional needs matter just as much as anyone else's. And in doing so, you're setting the standard for how you want to be treated moving forward. This process can be uncomfortable, no doubt. There will be moments of doubt, moments where you question whether you made the right decision. But let me tell you, the growth that comes from giving yourself the space to see the truth is invaluable. You start to understand that relationships are not meant to drain you, they're meant to lift you up. And if something doesn't lift you up, then it's time to let it go. So the next time you feel like you're putting in all the effort and getting little in return, remember that pulling back isn't a sign of defeat. It's a sign of self-respect. It's a powerful choice to stop chasing something that isn't aligned with your true needs. And when you make that choice, you open the door for something better, something that aligns with who you are, where you're headed, and what you deserve. Because the truth is, the more you stop chasing, the more you start attracting the things and people that are meant for you. And that's when real transformation happens. It's not in the chase. It's in the quiet, the stillness, the moments when you choose yourself first. When you stop trying to contact him, something amazing happens. You find yourself in a position of power. Now, I'm not talking about power in a controlling sense. I'm talking about the kind of power that comes from taking control of your own narrative, your own story. You stop allowing someone else to dictate the terms of how you interact, how you give, how you care. You take that back. And when you do, you're not just making a statement to him, you're making a statement to yourself. You're telling yourself, I am worthy of effort. I am worthy of respect. And I am not going to settle for less than that. This moment of stepping back is one of the most empowering things you can do. Why? Because in it, you're recognizing that you are not defined by someone else's actions or inactions. You are not defined by whether or not he answers your calls, whether or not he reaches out. You are defined by how you show up for yourself. By choosing to stop chasing, to stop reaching out, you are telling yourself that you are strong enough to stand on your own, to rely on your own worth, and to let go of the need for validation from someone who hasn't yet proven they are willing to meet you halfway. You've spent so much time trying to make the relationship work, trying to keep everything flowing. But what happens when you stop doing that? What happens when you step back and give yourself room to breathe? You start to see things for what they truly are. Maybe you'll see that he's not putting in the same effort. Maybe you'll realize that you've been neglecting yourself in favor of trying to fix what was broken. But here's the thing, even though it might hurt at first, it's also a realization that sets you free. You see, when you stop trying to contact him, you stop giving away your energy to something or someone who isn't meeting you at the same level. You stop being in a space of chasing, of always wondering if he's thinking about you, if he's missing you, if he's going to come around. When you step back, you stop putting your life on hold, waiting for someone to change, to realize what they have. And that's where your growth begins. In that silence, you have the opportunity to reconnect with yourself. You've been so focused on what was or what could have been, but now you get to focus on you. And it might feel uncomfortable at first because we're not used to being by ourselves. We're not used to letting go of control. But in that space of discomfort, that's where growth happens. You learn about your own needs, your own desires, your own worth. You rediscover passions and interests that maybe you pushed aside because you were always focused on someone else. The real beauty of stepping back is that it allows you to take ownership of your own happiness. It puts you in a position where you're no longer waiting around for someone to decide if you're worth their time, their effort. Instead, you realize that you are already enough. You are already whole. You are already whole. And if someone else wants to be part of your journey, they need to step up and meet you where you are. No more chasing, no more waiting, no more hoping they'll change. You are now in control of the narrative of your own life. And let's be real about this. You might be afraid to take that step. You might worry that stepping back will push him away for good. But here's the truth. If stepping back causes him to walk away without even trying to meet you halfway, then that's the universe telling you something important. It's time to move on. You don't need to fight for someone who isn't willing to fight for you. You deserve someone who shows up just as much as you do. Someone who is willing to match your energy, your effort, and your love. If they're not doing that, stepping back is the best thing you can do for yourself. Because in that moment, you get to show yourself that you don't need anyone to complete you. You are already complete. You are already powerful, already worthy, already deserving of love and respect. You just have to let go of the things that are holding you back from fully realizing that. When you stop trying to contact him, you stop waiting around for someone else to define your worth. You take back control. And once you do that, you're no longer dependent on someone's actions to tell you how valuable you are. you start to realize that your value isn't dependent on someone else's attention on whether they reach out or not. Your value comes from within. And that is the most powerful thing you can realize. So take a step back, let go of the chase. And when you do, you'll see something amazing happen. You'll start to attract the kind of love, the kind of respect, and the kind of effort you've always deserved. Because when you choose yourself, the right people will always rise to meet you. And that's the kind of love that lasts.